Spin your passion into a business with Shopify and break sales records with the world's best converting checkout. Let's hear that one more time. The world's best converting checkout. Shopify's legendary checkout makes it easier for customers to shop on your website, across social media, and everywhere in between. Now that's music to your ears. Any way you spin it, you can be a smash hit with Shopify. Start your $1 a month trial today at shopify.com/records.
Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Hello, my name is Annie Rogers, and I'm the General Manager here at Attitude. Thank you for joining today's event called Mental Health Out Loud. It's a new type of conversation where the editors of Attitude, along with leading experts in the field of ADHD and mental health, will answer your questions about the mental health topics of greatest concern to you. Today, we are here to discuss how to protect neurodivergent youth specifically from some of the mental health risks, and also to guide them toward the opportunities associated with social media use. So helping us navigate this really nuanced and important conversation today on mental health is Linda Charmaraman. She's a PhD senior research scientist at the Wellesley Centers for Women and director of the Youth, Media, and Wellbeing Research Lab. Her research interests include technology and adolescent health, digital citizenship, innovative research methods to include overlooked and hidden populations, and how social media identities, such as gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and even political affiliation, affect well-being. Welcome, Dr. Charmaraman. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Before we start our conversation, I have just a couple of housekeeping items to clear out. If you are tuned into our live event, you may submit questions at any time. Just navigate to the text box under the video player. We will do our best to weave in your questions throughout this conversation. And if you support the work we're doing here at Attitude, we encourage you to visit attitudemag.com/subscribe and sign up for Attitude Magazine. If you do it now, you'll get it in our fall issue, which has just come out, and it's got tons of articles and resources all about childhood anxiety, bullying, how parents can talk to anxious children. It's really a great back-to-school resource. So, Dr. Charmaraman, without any further ado, thank you so much for joining this urgent and important conversation about mental health and social media. We will be really basing today's conversation off of questions that we have received already from the Attitude audience. So I'm really just going to dig right in because we got so many questions. I would love to touch on as many as possible. We had a reader write in to say that I'm really curious about the side effects of social media use with children, adolescents, and even adults. I've noticed an increase in anxiety, depression, isolation, disengaging from social activities and sports that I attribute to too much electronic time. We heard a lot of questions like these. And so I wanted to just start out with asking you, what do we know about the connection between social media use and mental health, specifically among adolescents? And has this changed in the last 2.5 years?
Yes, this is a very, very popular question. It's on the minds of so many parents and educators and people in the community taking care of adolescents. And my answer is complicated because there's been the field of social media and well-being is actually pretty new compared to all the psychological and educational foundational areas because technology has been not kind of more around like in the last 20, 30 years. And sometimes it takes a lot of multiple studies to kind of verify the associations and directionality of, what comes first. Is it the mental health issues, or is it the technology, or does the technology come first and then leading you to use technology in a certain way depending on your mental health status? And so for every study you find out there that shows a strong association with mental health and negative mental health, outcomes and technology, there's also studies that show no connection, and there's also studies that show positive connections. And so in order to sort of winnow it down to something that maybe is more meaningful for people who aren't in the research world, I would say that it really depends on who your child is, what is their temperament, what is their ability to self-regulate, and what is the content that they are logging into. And I think also there's been a heightened concern over the number of minutes or the quantity of time that people are on technology, when in my perspective, in the research that I've been doing, for 15 years, is that it's the quality of the content much more than the quantity. And who are they interacting with? That's another really big part of the puzzle. Are they interacting with healthy, communication, peers, or are they interacting with people who don't treat them very well? And so that's my sort of complicated answer to that question. But the second part of your question, it has to do with the pandemic time. And absolutely, the depression, anxiety, loneliness levels have definitely skyrocketed during the pandemic, and also technology use, as you can imagine, because of remote learning, and also because of the social media, aspects that the adolescents who might have already been on social media before the pandemic, they probably increased it exponentially during the pandemic. And so some people have been worried about the increase in technology use, coupled with the increased struggles in mental health. And for some people, it was hard for them to find their community during the pandemic, because they weren't already kind of logged in. They didn't have their community already in place. I did all these interviews with adolescents during the pandemic, and some of them, it felt like almost like normal, because they're communicating with their friends all the time anyway. But the people that didn't even know how to contact their friends, they didn't have their phone number, they didn't have their Snap account, they didn't have anything, they didn't know their last name. They kind of lost connections with some people, and so I actually just published an article about the pandemic use, of the increased social media use, coupled with the mental health increases. And although we saw very small, significant effects, that they're related in a way, but it's not a big enough effect to actually say that there's any causal component. So, and so that's, I just wanted to put out that, because I think a lot of people are very, that's a very common argument when people see two lines going higher and increasing in parallel, like mental health struggles increasing and technology is increasing. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are actually related in a causal way. There's definitely associations for sure.
Right. And so, as you said, it depends so much on your child, and also how they're interacting with social media and with whom. As many parents have pointed out in the questions already, it's almost, it's required. Many high schools relay information via their social media accounts about athletics and after school activities, some even, requirements for the school. So it feels almost futile to try to keep, especially a high schooler, completely off of social media. So what you're saying is essentially we don't have, the research does not show a causal relationship by and large between social media use and worsening mental health. Now, individuals may have very different experiences. Certainly that doesn't capture every nuance, and so that actually leads to the next question I have, which is, do we is there any research to support the idea that, children with ADHD and perhaps some of its comorbid conditions may face an elevated risk? So as we know, ADHD is associated with emotional dysregulation, rejection-sensitive dysphoria, weak self-regulation, and impulsivity. Do those symptoms put our kids at greater risk for sort of detrimental effects of social media use?
Yes, I mean, I would say that anybody using social media, whether they have ADHD or not, are at risk for using social media to distract them from their regular life, from trying to get the things done that they need to get done. And I would say yes, ADHD people who are neurodiverse and who may have some attentional issues could face a little more struggle with regulating their mood and in being able to log off. And the thing is, with the research on ADHD, a lot of it is related. It's a lot of related to other behavioral health issues that come with ADHD, like for instance, having disrupted sleep, going to sleep later, maybe has to do with greater screen time. It's all kind of related in a cycle, and that's all related to maybe their mood. If they don't get enough sleep, and then they can't pay attention the next day as much, and then they kind of start to get behind in homework and schoolwork because they prefer to do things that actually might calm their mind. They might prefer to kind of like regulate themselves by using technology in some way. Sometimes they think of it as a coping mechanism. And so it depends on the impact of that technology. Does it calm them down? Does it make them feel less chaotic, in their mind? They can kind of just focus on that YouTube video. Or does it make them more moody? Does it make them feel like they have withdrawal symptoms, like as if it's an addiction? And then they kind of lash out at their family. And then the latter scenario is it's probably not a good tool to use for that particular individual. But other individuals might use it actually to really help them regulate their emotions. So.
Okay. And I guess one very public display that we've seen, some research that we've seen about sort of the risks to a certain population are the studies out of, I guess, Meta regarding teenage girls and their use of Instagram. And this kind of, I think it hit the news, about a little over a year ago, I believe, that it was worsening or perhaps even causing eating disorders among this population. And that idea of, I guess, the echo chamber, that if someone has shown an interest in like dieting content, they show you more and more and more dieting content, and it's hard to escape. Can you speak to that at all, and that risk that social media plays, especially to teenage girls, but overall of creating this echo chamber? Yes. I mean, there was a lot of press about those leaked findings about, teenage girls and body image issues, but I would have to say that I was not surprised at all, because the research has been showing that for many, many years, and it just felt like they were like certain companies, social media platform companies are kind of behind in being on top of the latest peer-reviewed research out there of scholars of this field. They rely on their own internal research quite a bit, which doesn't always give you the cachet as the peer-reviewed, research. And so I actually did do a research on body image and teenage, use of social media, and there was a lot of. I used a sample of about 700, participants, whereas the internal study had the stuff that they were looking at that was very qualitative about body image and eating disorders. It was a qualitative sample of only about 30 people, so it's not exactly representative. So I had a sample of 700, and about 20% report dissatisfaction with their body as they're looking at social media, in particular Instagram and Snapchat.
And it was a lot more easily found in females and anybody who checks their social media more frequently. And it's usually related to higher rates of depressive symptoms and online social anxiety. And some of these people that have these mental health struggles, they also find it hard to make new friends and are more socially isolated. And so it's hard to know the directionality, because this was a cross-sectional study, which means a one-time survey. So you can find out that there's an association between the dissatisfaction with their body and using social media, but you don't know which one came first. That's when you need longitudinal studies to figure that out. So we don't know if they came with body image issues, and so they look at images that kind of perpetuate some of those things that might really get their brain hyper-focused on those types of things, those ideal unrealistic images, or if it's or they came with a blank slate, and then the social media kind of infuses them with images that they didn't even realize that maybe they should be looking like that. Our study also showed that it wasn't just the images of your everyday peers; it's also celebrity images that make a difference. There's people that have very, very high concentrations of people they don't know on their social media sites. For instance, their favorite actors from Stranger Things, or celebrities and athletes and things like that. And they're paid to continue promoting sort of these ideals of performance and body image and wealth and luxury. Sometimes that could be really disconcerting to adolescents, minds and brains, as if that's something that they should have or that they should aspire to.
Okay. Right. So as you said, you were seeing a higher incidence of depressive symptoms among those who were reporting dissatisfaction with their bodies. And as we know, ADHD rarely travels alone. So the most common comorbidities are depression and anxiety. So we are probably looking at a higher risk population, adults and children, who could be already sort of at a higher risk for developing, either primary or secondary depression and anxiety. So that's an important, nuance to keep in mind, that not all users of social media are equal, and we know the challenges our children are facing when they come to the platforms. A really common question that we are getting is, here's an example of one. Can you speak to how to think about the use of social media? It feels as though our daughter has an addiction. And that raises the question of, how do we know if a child or a teenager is truly addicted to social media? Are there metrics? Are there guidelines? Some way that parents can tell that we're passing into troubling territory? Yeah.
Yes, very important question. It's something that medical professionals are just relatively recently trying to get into their usual, diagnostic, forms. How there's a lot of those checklists, when you go to the pediatrician, and media often isn't a part of those checklists, unfortunately. And I think the new generation of nursing and, medical students are going to have a lot more tools to be able to diagnose those kinds of things, at those annual checkups. There is a 3-item diagnostic scale that people use in the research community, and it has to do with, do you feel irritated when away from the internet? And do you feel anxious when you're away from the internet? Do you feel withdrawal symptoms, like you just feel pain almost from your body when you're away from the internet? Do you lose motivation to do other things that need to get done because of your use of the internet? So as you can hear, this tool, it was developed for internet use in general. It's not specifically for social media. So a lot of it is all related. It's like, are you hooked on, is it your phone that you're hooked on? Is it internet? Is it social media? Is it certain sites? Is it YouTube? Is that why you're on it for 6 hours? Are you gaming all the time? So I think internet is a good gauge too, because you could use it in so many different ways, actively or passively. And I'd say if those questions I asked earlier, if your child is feeling like if they can't have normal interactions with other people without the internet, if they've lost their friends in person, they don't ever see their friends in person because they prefer the internet, although ADHD individuals do prefer, some of them do prefer being on technology and communicating with their people through technology. And so that alone isn't going to be a cause of concern because there's a preference there. But also if you're not able to fulfill their daily tasks, their homework, are they skipping meals? Are they skipping their after school, clubs and teams? Are they missing their tournaments? Are they getting violent, with family members? I've had interviews, with families where people will get so upset, they'll throw, because they have to get off of, their device, they'll throw things and they'll break things. And, when it gets to that level of disproportionate anger, because you're tearing them away from the thing that they desperately need, and it's disrupting family time and being able to talk, with each other, with the normal tone and not just, it's always, completely dramatic scene. It's definitely something that you can ask, school counselors. They're actually a lot more versed in this area than a lot of medical professionals. Some of the medical professionals actually think that it's not really in their purview. They're thinking of physical health. Like, they really focus on physical health and want to make sure that, if it's affecting their sleep, then they want to hear about it, and pediatricians and social workers, therapists also, are great, resources, but the thing is, there's a specific kind of training that some of maybe the old school, therapy community may not understand as much about the newer technology, addiction sorts of issues. Believe it or not, it's actually not classified as an official addiction in like the diagnostic, manuals in psychiatry, because it takes like decades and decades of that to actually be a thing. And so some of those people who were trained in the old school methods will kind of be dismissive of technology addictions because it's not actually, in the manual itself. There are burgeoning programs out there that are trying to help families manage, problematic internet use, problematic gaming disorders. And I know of one personally that's at the Boston Children's Hospital Digital Wellness Lab community. I have some colleagues there that I collaborate with, and they have, outpatient sort of resources for families. And I do believe it's covered by insurance. Not all these programs are covered by insurance because of the fact that it's not, something that is documented as an actual addiction yet. But there are insurance companies are finally starting to get they're kind of waking up to the reality that families need this support and it affects their everyday lives. I mean, this has been happening. A lot of internet addiction type of, recovery programs are a lot more common in other countries. The U.S. is sort of behind in this area.
That's really interesting. We're getting a lot of people nodding their heads and saying, yes, what you're describing, irritability, anxious, withdrawn, losing motivation to do other things. These sound very, honestly, disproportionate anger is really sounding a little too familiar for many of our listeners today. And it's interesting that that other countries are ahead of us on this. So I think it's great advice to turn to the school counselors, because obviously this is in their wheelhouse, and perhaps a therapist. Do you have any experience with whether individual or family therapy may be a solution here. I'm just thinking we've got parents here are saying, you know what, I have a problem too. And my children are seeing how I'm using technology. And this is like a systemic issue.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I wanted to just kind of confirm to you all that technology is a tool that could be positive or negative. So don't get too beat up on yourself if you're using it quite a bit. I mean, this is the 21st century, right? These tools are going to be here to stay. But it is true. The actions and behaviors of, parents and, adults in a child's life, do kind of relate to how they, use their own technology, or how they relate to, social relationships and friendships, and how much they, rely on things like technology to cope and so family therapy is an interesting idea too, because there's been research that actually shows that families who have a child with problematic internet disorder often have family relationships that are contentious in other ways. Like there's some kind of like trust issues, perhaps. And so sometimes it's about being able to communicate with each other, and also there's a growing pain within families in terms of technology use. When you had a child and you knew exactly what they were doing on their iPad, and they were looking at those cute little YouTube videos when they're 6, and then they develop into tweens, and then you kind of still trust them in that they probably will do what you want them to do and not go on it for too long. And you might want to have some restrictions, and you might want to check out who they're, socializing with and check in. And then, as they get older, there's this autonomy seeking. As they get older, they want to have their own space. They want to have their private, kind of diary, kind of journal space to kind of be themselves. So I would say it's a growing pain for everybody, because parents don't have a workshop. They don't have like a class that they can take and be like, oh, when is a good time to start? Just trusting that I've given them all the active communication strategies about what to look out for on the internet. When do I let them go and kind of just be their own, independent, autonomous self? It all depends on the individual, right? It depends on how much they can self-regulate, how much when they realize when they have had enough, when they really need to find some alternative activities so that they don't get too sucked into that world. On the other hand, if they are really finding real connections with their friends in real life, maybe they're on Discord and they're gaming and they're also talking about homework that day. I mean, that's another healthy way of, dealing with, being with your friends, happens to have the tool, the mediator is this game, but it could be a very healthy way to interact with your friends. So before you worry about how much, too much time spent on a particular site or on a particular, program, find out what is the reason why they're on this, site. What draws you to it? Maybe even join that community, the online community, and check out what they're doing. And then you find out, oh wait, they're actually doing a lot of like very innocent, silly things, and they're not being faced with, some of the horror stories that you hear in the media sometimes. But yeah, the family part of it, it's all sort of related. Sometimes there's issues with self-regulation for whatever reason, whether it's ADHD or some other issue that the child might have, that parents already have a lot of concerns in other areas, in terms of sleep or being able to do well in school. And so I'd say a therapist, for the family could be really helpful to understand what is a normal amount, like a normal range for their child to have that little moodiness. Like, is this just adolescence? Is this just, they're starting middle school? This is normal. It's hormones. And then what is the line? What is the boundary for when there needs to be a lot more attention and intervention happening?
Okay. I did want to back up ever so briefly. a couple of people wondering if there was a name for the diagnostic scale you mentioned regarding internet use.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Okay. I'm going to say it the right way. So it is, let me pull it up. It is the Problematic and Risky Internet Use Screening Scale. And it's the acronym is PRIUSS, Problematic and Risky Internet Use Screening Scale.
Okay. And if you missed that, everyone, we will provide that name and a link if we can find it in the resources when we send them out after the event. So if you missed it, please don't fear. We will follow up with that. And I did. One person wrote in to say that perhaps occupational therapy could also be an interesting option for families who are looking at addressing some of these problematic social media behaviors. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, great idea.
But on this topic of, parents modeling the behaviors, it almost goes without saying, but I'm going to say it, that ADHD is highly heritable. So if a child has ADHD, chances are at least one of their parents also has ADHD. It may not be diagnosed. As we know, ADHD was really not well recognized in women, particularly until quite recently. So there are a lot of moms out there who have been dealing with symptoms their whole lives. So regardless of diagnosis, we know that ADHD brains are always seeking dopamine and that social media can deliver dopamine in spades, right? So there could be beyond, perhaps some problematic family dynamics. There could just be a hereditary dopamine seeking neurobiology here at work, right? I mean, that could be underlying some of this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, kind of related to that, sometimes ADHD, individuals with ADHD are more likely to engage in like problematic gaming behavior, because they use it as a coping strategy. So they can really, it makes them feel like they have more control over their negative thoughts. That was something that was really interesting. I looked at a study recently about how mental health and behavioral difficulties, when they're feeling like they can't control some of this negative thoughts, they turn to digital technologies to help cope with it, to distract themselves from the negative thoughts. So sometimes, the technology, it really depends. I want to circle back again about what is their motivation for using it, and what is the gain? Like, what is the thing that it detracts from, and is it worth it, to have some of those gains? But yeah, the heritability thing is interesting.
Yeah.
In a way, the parents might understand too. So in a way, they kind of understand that it feels good, when you're distracting yourself from those negative things that you might want to escape from, which is a normal sort of human condition. It's really not just ADHD and people in ADHD, but it is a coping strategy, especially during times like these in the pandemic when they can't go outside as much. The world keeps changing about everybody's sort of tolerance for technology use. So.
Absolutely. And, a phenomenon that we have become familiar with here over the last year or so is something called revenge bedtime procrastination. I think some of our listeners may be familiar with it. We do have an entire webinar on this topic, but basically it's the idea that it tends to be adults who talk about it more. But that at the end of the day, when you've just spent, you've bled your last ounce of energy, you've had no time for yourself all day. And so you end up lying in bed and doom scrolling for like far, far too long. And it's it's like taking the place of a healthy relaxation. It's you want to claim your me time, but you end up sort of sabotaging, right? Because then you're just exhausted the next day and you fall into this terrible pattern. So, I know that sleep is critical for developing minds and bodies. And so that is kind of, I guess, an easy guideline to give parents, that the phones should not come into the bedrooms at night. I have heard that. I don't know if there's any research to back that up, but have you seen anything regarding setting that limit on technology use for youth and adolescents?
I think there's been research about the impact of notifications on phones, for sure, because then you're kind of keyed into that notification. You want to be there right when something interesting happens. And so, yes, it definitely disrupts sleep. And probably one of the solutions could be to turn off the notifications, for sure, and not to sleep with your phone. And be don't worry about it in terms of you thinking that your family is the only one that has their phone nearby at nighttime, because 80% of adolescents actually sleep with their phone. So the ones with the phone. And so that is a very common thing. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends an hour before bedtime to kind of turn it off, which is really painful. I'm sure some of you are wincing. That's your time when you can do your revenge, scrolling. But it does disrupt the sort of circadian, patterns with the blue light, and it might be really harder to fall asleep, and that might be especially an issue for individuals with ADHD who may just want to just keep feeling that, sense of dopamine from that, like, really interesting YouTube channel that keeps using those algorithms to keep them hooked. And so, yeah.
Oh, excuse me. Right, exactly. So there are a lot of parents listening who are wondering what, they're negotiating with teenagers, right? This is not an easy job. So that is one piece of bona fide medical recommendation that we can share with our teenagers, that the American Academy of Pediatrics, did I get that right?
Yeah,
recommends no phone use for an hour before bed. Now, we know they're not going to welcome that with open arms, but that's okay. Are there other recommendations regarding, I know you said quantity is not as important as quality, but regarding limits on hours of screen time at different ages that we could also use to our benefit in these conversations?
Sure. I would say that a lot of people don't realize the impact of the network that your child, socializes with, the peer networks. And there's been research in our lab and in other labs that the larger the network, the more social obligations you have and the more hooked you get, because you have so many people that you want to, interact with their posts, and they're going to feel upset if you don't, interact as much. And so I think one recommendation, it's not, hard and fast rule about the maximum number, but really pay attention to who your kids are interacting with. If it's like 1,000 people and they're like in 7th grade, how do they know 1,000 people? That is alarming, and it's actually very common. They will just keep adding those quote unquote friends and followers who they don't know. A lot of them they don't know because they are friends of friends, or friends of friends of friends, or they are celebrities. And then their feed, as they're scrolling through, are often taken up by things that advertisers want them to see, and not like hanging out with their friends and finding out what's going on with their friends, which is really the point of social media. Is you're connecting with people that you want to connect with, not with a bunch of ads or a bunch of influencers that want your attention. So I would recommend really thinking about the network, and when you have conversations with your child about, okay, you're starting to feel bad about yourself, maybe about your body image, or you notice it right after you're scrolling through Instagram, for instance. Maybe scroll together through it, and then they can point out what it is that is making them feeling, kind of dissatisfied with themselves, or they're feeling not good enough, they're not beautiful enough, not smart enough, whatever it might be. Those people, those influences, definitely at that age, it's hard for tweens, especially, to unfriend or unfollow or not accept somebody's friend request. You think it's not, it's a thing. Everybody's friends with everybody else. You want to have as many people in your class, to show that you're popular and all that kind of stuff. And so it's okay to kind of reassure them that, oh, this person is posting things that are really inappropriate or really getting you down. Let's just sort of hide them for a while or unfriend them. You can always friend them again when things settle down with your mood. And so that's something I would love to kind of put out there is parents be interested in who they're interacting with, and also if they are using social media to compare their lives with other people's lives. So that's usually called, like lurking or sort of passively looking at things. So how adults, they doom scroll. They look at all the negative, media headlines, and that's what adults experience when they're quote unquote doom scrolling. But for teens, what they're doing is actually going through it all and trying to figure out who they are in relation to all the people that they know. Are you smart enough? Are you beautiful enough? Are you tall enough? Are you, funny enough? And you go on the nicest vacations, like these other people who are always posting on their beautiful vacations. And so there's a lot of that social comparison. And so the active conversations, because that happens whether it's on social media or not. They're going to do social, comparisons in the hallways. That's a very normative aspect of adolescent development. But sometimes people can get fixated on certain things, and it's good to have those active conversations. And that's the best time is when they're tweens heading into the smartphone era, and as they work on their smartphone use, their early smartphone use, and starting up their first social media sites, to continue being with them, like having conversations about what's going on, how is it going, who is this person, how do you know this person, maybe being friends with them on their network, that will be helpful. Now, as they get older, though, when they get into the high school years, this is when they, a lot of times now they're starting to think about, how the impression they're going to have, for future employers and for colleges. And so they might start having hidden accounts. They might start, doing this is a nice clean Facebook page for grandma. And then they'll have, several Instagram accounts and Snap accounts that some people are on, some people are off. And so having conversations about that over time, it's perfectly fine for people to have their own silly account. Usually it's just an account to help people feel real and feel like they can just post any silly thing without being feeling like they have to curate everything. So usually those fake accounts, those private accounts that parents don't see, what we found in our research, they're really pretty harmless. They're not doing something really illegal, or they're not doing something that's heinous. It's really just them being silly, and that they could be free to be authentic with their friends. So those are my recommendations, just to know more about what's going on social media, just like you would ask them about their friends in real life. So how's it going? Or you're having an issue with this person, what happened? And it's the same thing. It's like teaching them how to drive. You don't just tell them one talk. You don't just give them the keys. You give them, okay, this is what happened. If this happens, here are some options for you. When there's a yellow light, you can either try to make that light, or you can try to slow down. What are the risks, associated with those different decisions? And then you can understand what your child is going through in their head, and what kind of things that they're grappling with. Because what they're grappling with is probably more different than you think compared to what you're grappling with on social media and your own addiction to your own device. That they have the hormones in the teenage years, on top of that. So to be reminded about those years, I would definitely keep the conversations flowing. And if you can't do it, ask a family member to do it. Maybe an older sibling who you trust, or a cousin, an older cousin, or an auntie. It doesn't have to be the parent. Some parents really don't feel equipped. They don't feel interested in dealing with the social media stuff, it could be a trusted family member who also could be the family liaison.
That's great advice. And, as you said, making it an ongoing conversation. I know that with my own kids, like I have talked to them about like, you know what, this person's not making me feel good. So I'm going to like unfriend them. And why? And like, we'll have that talk with them about whether they're like, I think I'm using this too much. I'm going to remove it from my phone because I can feel that I'm being drawn to it. So being open about, our own challenges and weaknesses could help with this. Now, there's a campaign that I've recently learned about called Wait Till 8. And it's encouraging parents to wait until 8th grade to get their kids a smartphone of their own. Do you know if this recommendation is based on research, and is there any, golden age for getting your child a phone? I mean, and by the way, I completely recognize that some families absolutely just need a phone in order to communicate with logistics across households and with activities and all of that. So no guilt here. Just wondering if there is a recommended age.
Yes, this is a very, very common question that I get asked for sure. I mean, especially since, I have a 10-year-old daughter, and the average age in the U.S. of getting its first smartphone is 10.3. And she keeps asking me, hey, all my friends have a phone. And I always tell her, I'll know when you're ready, and she's not quite ready. And the Wait Till 8 movement, I think, is more about parents trying to band together to make sure that if they want their child to wait till then, they have other families that will be a part of that movement too, or else it doesn't work. If they're the only ones that have no phone or social media, it would increase feelings of isolation. Now, there's very little research on the impact of early initiation, into social media. Our lab happened to publish something this year about early initiation, whether if it's any different between 13-year-olds versus 11 or 12 versus 10-year-olds. And what we found is that it really doesn't matter as much between 11, 12, and 13 if they have a phone at that age in terms of the negative consequences of, problematic internet use, being on it too much, or harassment, online harassment, and sexual harassment. There's not much that is a difference between those ages. However, if you give them a phone at 10 or younger, like 9, 10, 8, they're significantly more likely to report, more harassment, more experiences of doing things that are behind their parents' back. For instance, like having friends that they know their parents wouldn't approve of, and so I feel like that 10 age might be it's a little bit of a tender age for them to be able to go on social media in predominantly, mainly because of the fact that the earlier you start social media, the earlier you start your network building. And as I said before, the more that you have on your network, like let's say you have 1,000 people, versus 50, you don't have as many social obligations because if you just start really slow and low, 50 is manageable. Maybe it's all the people in your class, plus some after school people and some family members. Okay, that's very manageable. But if you're 10 and then you start early and you start snowballing, and then maybe you have 1,000 people by the time you're 13, as I said before, it really increases likelihood that the more you're on it, the more you're obligated to be on it, the more you don't want to miss out. It just kind of snowballs. Now, there's one positive thing that I found in my research, which was surprising to us, is that the earlier you start social media, the more likely you are to figure out the ways in which you can be more increase your positive, like sort of civic engagement behaviors on social media. Like the more you use it for positive, event planning and raising awareness of social issues and being supportive of other people. And so you not only learn you get exposed to a lot of the negativity, but you also know how to use it in a positive way, as opposed to those people in which the parents kind of kept them away from social media until they're 13, for instance. A lot of times they've been kind of kind of infused with the messages that social media is harmful. We need to stay away from that at all costs. We're going to hold off as long as possible, as if we're holding our breath, as if it's like the end of the world when we get you on it. And so in a way, they never end up using social media for this connected purposes as much as the ones that started early with most of their peers. And so there's a pro and a con. It really depends on your child. If they are somebody that really can't handle any online drama, like, oh, that person went out with me, with my other friend, and I wasn't invited. If your child can't handle that, then it probably is something that you might want to have more conversations about it and tell them, that wasn't very kind of them, to do that. But then they're not necessarily doing that to hurt you. They're just posting and not thinking about it. That's what teenagers do. They post, they don't think about the consequences of it. That's a normal thing in adolescence. And sometimes people interpret it as something more negative than that. The purpose of that person was a little bit thoughtless kind of thing. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's helpful. Yeah. Well, it makes me think that one of the primary concerns among caregivers of younger children, specifically, like I'm thinking middle school, really, is bullying on social media. And, the fact of the matter is, like, some children, if they do face bullying, they may hide it because they're embarrassed. And we as parents want to know that this is happening so we can help to stop it. Do you have any advice for parents on what to look for or ways to intervene? And is online bullying really the problem that many of us, assume that it is?
Well, I would say the term online bullying, it has been sort of defined differently by different researchers. So some of the criteria that would make it on one person's list may not be the same, for another person's list. Like, for instance, is it a one-time occurrence? Then bullying naturally has that sort of repeated history, sort of a tenor, but also there's negative things that happen, negative exposures that aren't about repeated events. And so sometimes people are dealing with different constructs, in the literature. Sometimes the research findings are different because of that, but because of the definitions of online bullying. But I would say that a lot of times young people want to keep some of those things to themselves if they are feeling bad about some interactions. Sometimes it has to do with they're afraid that the parent, if they find out about something, negative online, some parents will kind of yank it away. They'll be like, okay, well, you need to shut that down. You need to deactivate that, or I don't want, I don't trust you. I want to make sure that phone is taken away so that you're not like all grumpy all the time. That kind of reaction. And so I would recommend that no matter what your child comes to you with, whether it's a story, something funny that happened on social media, or something that you don't like, that you really want, your first initial reaction is to protect them, and that you want to take away that harm. The only problem with that is that if they see that reaction, they may not come to you next time. They might be afraid that you're going to, make them check out completely. And so that kind of reduces the line of communication, like I was saying before, like the act of communication, kind of just, always have that curious face on when they come to you with an issue on social media, and then try to figure out how to, deal with it together, as opposed to, well, I know the solution. You need to, I'm going to go and do something really embarrassing, like call that person's mother, So as long as your active communication is open, and, sometimes you could tell too by their mood when they're on it, and they have like their sort of energy level kind of changes and shifts sometimes it's not something that they can actually tell you themselves. They don't even realize that these things are happening to them. That's when I would just elicit, the conversations. I would make sure that we talk about it and also co-view it. Back in the old days, when they are 6, you're kind of co-viewing those YouTube videos. You can also co-view their social media accounts. As some parents look at their kids' texts, just to see what is going on, making sure that everything is in the healthy range of communication.
Mm-hmm. That's great advice to make it a collaborative, a problem-solving approach, because you're right. If they sense that they're going to lose their phone entirely or lose access to all social media, chances are they are not going to be openly sharing those experiences with us. And that actually leads to a question I want to make sure we get to. So many parents, myself included, are very concerned about Snapchat. It has sort of made a resurgence. All the kids are using it, and you can't see what's going on there because the messages disappear. Should we be worried? Should we disallow Snapchat? Is there any research on Snapchat that we can point to? This just seems like it is unique in this way, but probably there will be others like it where the digital footprint is very difficult to follow, and that makes us really nervous.
Yes, it also makes trying to problem solve together when something dramatic happens, like in the school setting, when they're trying to figure out why is everybody upset and talking about that snap, the night before, and then the counselors are trying to figure out, okay, where's the evidence? What is the image, and what is everybody talking about? But then they can't reproduce it, or somebody took a screenshot of it, and so you can reproduce some of that drama. I would say most of the interactions that people are having, that tweens are having, at least on social media, are primarily positive. I think I saw there was a national study that said, primarily about 70 to 80% of youth feel more connected on social media, and it's around 25 or 26 of them feel like it actually reduces, their mental health or feeling like it makes life more difficult for them, and so I would say, for those people, for that subset of people in which it's not just cute, silly photos and it's not just like, cute memes and things like that, that there are things that are happening that make them, feel more isolated, feel less connected, feel, they feel the FOMO, the fear of missing out quite a bit. So if your child is that person that really is highly sensitive to FOMO and highly sensitive to finding out things that they thought they were, somebody's really good friend, and they find out that they're not as good a friend. Those are some conversations to have. I think Snapchat is, I would say I wouldn't necessarily, as a whole, as a social media platform, I wouldn't veer people away from it. Although I would say that the impact of the social obligations because of the streaks, I think, could really fuel into the hyper, focus on Snap. They don't want to break the streak with some of their closest friends, and that could cause a lot of anxiety and a lot of misunderstandings. I've known youth in our studies that have, when they go on vacation, they actually hand over their Snap account to their friends so that they can keep the streaks going, because they're going camping. They don't have internet access. And so it's that level of social obligations that are happening in our youth today that they really don't want to break those streaks. And in my mind, that probably is it's something that a lot of parents don't realize, that the kids are really worried about losing those streaks and increasing the social obligations, which increases anxiety and maybe feeling depressed because people get into fights. Their friends get into fights because, I did this for you for 6 months and then you just dropped, you forgot me. And so there could be increased drama because of those features of Snapchat. So just check in with your child, make sure that they're using it in ways that it's not going to increase the online social obligations and their anxiety.
I do not know a single parent of a tween or a teen who wants more drama in their life. So, and I was blissfully ignorant about the streaks issue. So those are all really good things to keep in mind as we navigate our way through this. And, unfortunately, we're out of time here today. This was such a really illuminating conversation. Dr. Charmarman, thank you so much for contributing your insight to our audience here today on this really tough topic. And I want to say to our audience, thank you for the questions. This was totally based off of questions we received from you. And we also welcome your ideas for more of these mental health out loud conversations. This idea came directly from readers, and we are listening. So please tell us what else you would like us to cover. But for today, I think we're all a bit more equipped to navigate one more day with our children and their social media use, and to forge a better way forward at the start of this back to school season. So thank you again, Dr. Charmarman. Thank you everyone for joining us. And we hope you will join us again at Attitude for a live webinar in the future.
For more Attitude podcast and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.
Grand Canyon University makes earning your degree possible with over 130 academic programs for traditional campus students, with more than 80 bachelor's programs offered online. GCU provides you with the personal support you need, from complimentary unofficial transcript evaluations within 24 business hours to scholarships, academic support, and your GCU graduation team, led by your own university counselor. Find your purpose at GCU. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu.